Hi, welcome to Cloud Lab. My name is Marco Martinez, and this is our second part about Node.js and JavaScript. And in this video, we will cover ternary conditions, nested functions, arrow functions, anonymous functions, promises with async and await, classes, and the Node package module. So let's start with the ternary topic. And again, I will try to not type as much as I can. One of the things I hate is the annoying sound of the keyboard. I have a red cherry keyboard here, so it makes a lot of noise. I also have a brown one, but it's at work, so I don't have it with me. So let's start with ternary conditions. So ternary conditions, the purpose of using ternary conditions is to type less lines of code and also to make things a lot more easy to read. So if, let me just comment this part. So here we have a variable called condition, and as a result, it will be an either true or false. So in other words, this condition, it's a Boolean. So 1 equals to 1, so this is true. So the result is true. And here at the bottom, I'm assigning, I'm actually having a new variable called result with a ternary condition. So I have my condition, question mark, if true, colon, else. So condition, if true, it will be okay, else, not okay. So that's the result that we're expecting. So now let's print that in our console. So okay, because 1 it's equal to 1, so that's true. So if we change it to 2, so 1 it's not equal to 2, that's a false statement. So again, it's printing now not okay. So again, for ternaries, you have condition, question mark, if true, column, else. So if not true. So how this thing will look like using if conditions and the if else. So it will look like this. This is exactly the same stuff. So we have an if, a condition, and then we're basically printing to the console if that condition is true, else we're printing to the console not okay. So again, it's exactly the same thing. We're achieving the same result, but as you can see, we're using less lines of code, and it's actually a lot easier to read. So because we're just reading everything in one line. So how I use the ternary conditions on my day-to-day activities. So here I have here at the bottom, let me just comment this line, and also let me just comment this block. So here, so what I want to achieve here. So I want to display a message of basically telling my user that how many calls he has waiting on queue. So I want to make the difference of calls and call, so singular, plural. So here I have, on this example, I have a variable call, or actually a variable named calls with value of 1. So here on my console log on line number 23, you have the value of variable calls space ternary condition. If calls is greater than 1, equals to calls, else call without an S, then waiting in queue. So if we run this file, you have 1 call waiting on queue. So it's working as expected. So let's say that we have 5 calls waiting in queue. So now I assigned the value 5 to my variable calls. And if we run our file again, it will now display you have 5 calls waiting in queue. So it's working as expected. So as you can see, it's very easy to read. It's one line. We can easily understand everything in one shot, and we can actually deduce the output by just reading everything. So again, very useful. let me just uncomment this line so you can actually run everything in one shot if you want, if you are downloading the repository. So now let's move out to nested functions, arrow functions, and anonymous functions. Let me just open that file. Nested functions. So what we have here, so if let me first comment everything. So in our first chapter, we discussed about, and actually I show you how to declare functions. And here on line number from 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, I have two different ways of declaring functions. And the one I use the most is line 6, 7, and 8. But I used line 3, 4, and 5 to just give you a clear example, and also to show you that you can do that functions are variables. And in other words, we can read that variable test has a value of a function, that the variable test2 has a value of a function. Okay, so if we run this file, or actually if we run this file, yes, if we run this file test2, actually make console log the results, console log test. For running functions, you have to use parentheses. Perfect. So both are working as expected, and as you can see, are virtually the same. So no difference. And again, I just wanted to show you that you can write functions in two different ways. And again, why I'm showing you this again? So again, you can pass functions to another function. Again, the same way as you passed variables into a function as input parameters, you can also pass functions as input parameters. So for example, let's create a variable. Let me just console log this part. Let me move this to top. Perfect. So I have a variable name array. That's an array. Right now it has two values, Marco and Martinez, two string values. And I have here at the bottom two functions. One function, the one called display name, it's accepting one variable, and it's returning that it's returning a string with that variable. So in other words, when we run this function called display name, it's returning your name is and the value that we passed. So let me just run it just to show you that. So console log display name. Let me just remove this part. Okay, your name is test. So we have a very simple function at the bottom, line 34, 35, 36. So let's now add more complexity. So in our function on from line 30 or now 29, 33, 31. So that function called join names is accepting an array, and it's also accepting a callback function. So in other words, a function. And the return value of this function is basically the result of running the callback function. And again, that callback function, we're passing a string as input. So let me just type it differently so you can probably get a better look. So function A, so function. Okay. So function A, it's a function, and it's accepting one value, and that value right now we're actually just creating a string from our array. You are joining that array using comma then space. So if we pass this array, for example, Marco Martinez, the output of using join, it will be Marco, comma, space Martinez. So that's the expected output. So in other words, our callback is our nested function. Callback. Let me just type it again. Callback. Perfect. So let's now write it. So let's just write it using our first example. So we're console log the result of the function join names. We're passing our array, and as second parameter, we're passing a function. So when we run it, your name is Marco Martinez, because Marco Martinez is the result of the first function. We're passing the result of the first function to the nested function, and that in our case it's named callback. So this is our nested function. Okay. So we have different ways of writing this and expecting the same result. First is by using anonymous function. So instead of writing a separate function, we can actually just write the function inside or actually as a parameter without having to specify its name. And without a name, a function is called anonymous because it's without a name. So here in this example on line 22, 23, and 24, we're again just running the exact same function. We're passing an array, but now we're just passing a function, an anonymous function that is accepting one value and is returning a string with that value. Your name is Marco Martinez. So the result is exactly the same as the first one, but as you can see, it's clearly more convenient because we don't have to write a separate function for handling the your name is Marco Martinez. We can just simply type everything in one. It's almost like one line, but it's again a lot more easier, more convenient, and again it's less messy, obviously. But we also have a third method, and it's by using arrow functions. So arrow function, it's basically the compact way of writing nested functions. So again, we're just passing an array. We're passing a function. In this case, it's just accepting one input value. Then we're returning, that's the arrow value, returning this string. So as you can see, it's very compact, very easy to read. Also, this thing can be written in different ways. So that's also one of the advantages of arrow function. It's that it's very flexible, very compact. So when you're only having one parameter, you can skip parentheses. Parentheses are optional when you only have one parameter. Let me just console log everything so we can actually just see the different versions of writing the same arrow function. Oh god, I commented the array. So Marco Martinez, the same result. And as you can see, also the return value is optional when you're returning the same value, actually the same value on the same line. But if you want, you can also specify that. So return, return. Okay. So exactly this same, and obviously when you have more than one parameter, you have to use parentheses. So parameter 2 will be here. So again, so different ways of writing nested functions. I'm gonna just return everything for our documentation. Here, yes. So let me just return our array at the top. So again, arrow functions are essential. Actually, are getting very popular on Node.js 8, 10, 12. Again, one of the primary advantages on writing less lines of code, and also by making code more easy to read. Again, for me, as my personal view of arrow functions is that, again, when you start to use them and you get comfortable using them, it gets you write very fast. But if you're having if you're struggling to write arrow functions, I don't see any problems writing with anonymous functions. So for me, using anonymous functions and arrow functions have the same value on terms of knowledge, and again, the objective is to achieve the same result. And here we are achieving the same result by writing nested functions on different ways. So let's move out. So that was nested functions. So now let's work with promises, async, and await. So let me just close that, open our promises, and let me just open again our nested functions. So what was the purpose of nesting our functions? So the purpose of nesting function is to basically have micro functions that will accomplish small tasks, then chaining the result from the first result of the first function, chaining that result into our second function. So we're nesting those results and chaining those results into one result, into one result. So it's like an avalanche, basically. So now with promises and with async await, instead of chaining those events or chaining those functions and result, we can simply write everything in one line, and you will see that it's actually easier to read and easier to write. So let's open promises. So first, it looks a little bit complex, but it's actually very easy to understand. So first let's work on the bottom. So for writing asynchronous functions, you have to wrap everything around a promise. So in this case, this function will return a promise. So the return value of this function, it's a promise. A promise has two parameters, a resolve and a reject parameter. In this example, we're just creating a timeout. But again, a promise has two possible outcomes, so resolve, so okay, or a reject, not okay. So when things goes right, and where you, for example, you are querying a database and you are having the results that you want, you're resolving your promise with a positive, yes, with the data that you want. And if you have an error, you want to reject your promise. So those are the two possible results. In this example here, I have a timeout. A timeout that is again, timeout has two parameters. So timeout has, the first parameter is the callback function, and the second parameter is the amount of time in milliseconds that you want to delay your callback function. So let ms delay. So in other words, we're just passing a value. So if we pass, for example, 2000 milliseconds, in other words, 2 seconds, after 2 seconds, this function that is nested will run. Okay, in this case, we're just resolving with waited for X amount of time. So we're just resolving the entire promise with a string of waited for X amount of time. Okay, so how to use promises? Promises have to be used on asynchronous functions. So inside an async function. Why? Because if we just let me just comment this part. If we run this and we console log the result. So let's say, for example, let me move it here at the top. Console log wait for 3000 seconds. 300, not 3000. Okay, let's run it. Clear, not promise. Okay, so promise pending and result. So as you can see, when I'm console or just printing to the console the result of running my promise with a parameter of 3000 milliseconds, the only thing that I'm seeing here on the console is a promise. So a promise that is running on the background and it's waited to be resolved or reject. So those are the two possible outcomes from a promise. So again, if I want to wait for that result, I have to use an asynchronous function. So a wait can only be used inside an async function. So if we move our function or promise into a async function, we can now wait for the result. So await console log a, and is now working as expected. No, I waited for 1000 milliseconds. And again, I can, if I don't want to wait and I just want to run everything synchronously on the background, I can just remove the await and it will work like I just run on the background basically. So what the beauty of this is that we can actually chain events in a more natural way. We can just basically say, okay, this is the result of the first promise. Now I want to pass that result into another promise. Then we're just chaining the results, but in a more natural way of writing and easier to read. So for example, if okay, now I want to wait for 2 seconds. Okay, wait for 1 second, now wait for 2 seconds. So if we read it, how it will sound, I'm assigning the variable a, I'm waiting for that function to be completed, then I'm moving to line number 6, I'm assigning the value b to the result of promise of waiting 2000 milliseconds. Then I'm printing to the console the result of promise A, then the result of promise B. Okay. So with promises, you can also catch the result and error. So if, for example, if something happens on your database insertion and you want to catch that error rejection, you can use then for catching the result. If you're not doing anything, you can return it as it is, and you can catch the error If you are not doing any data transformation, you can just return it as it is. So in other words, if I write A and B, they're exactly the same. So they produce the same result. But if I want to do like data transformation, like let's say, for example, here I want to print in variable C, I want to do like data transformation. I want to console log log that promise completed, then return res. So if I want to do like a data transformation, I can do it from before I even return the value to the variable C. I can do like, again, data transformation, additions, or whatever you want before you return the value to variable C. So as you can see, it's working exactly the same. So a promise completed, wait for 1000 milliseconds, blah, blah, blah. So working as expected. Yep. So let me just remove my comments. So those were promises. Now let me just clear my console. Clear. Oh my god. Let's move to the next topic. Classes. Classes. Where is C? Okay, I have it here. So classes, it's a way of writing templates for me. So templates, and when you want to organize again things on templates, when you have like a very structured way of writing code. So here, for example, I have a class object named person. So this is the name of that class object called person. On my constructor, this is basically how I want to initialize that class object. So I want to initialize this object by assigning to itself. So by assigning to my person object a key value with the key name value name, and with the key age value, the value of variable age. And I can also have inside my class object methods. So I have here a method or a function of email. In this case, I'm assigning to my object a new key called email. And I also have another function or another method, and this one, it's again, the only thing that's doing here is just converting my class object into a JSON string. So again, the beauty about classes is that you can actually, again, because it's a template, you can create as many persons as you want. So for example, here I'm assigning to the I'm creating a constant person1, creating a new class. I'm passing two parameters. The first one, it's a string Marco. The second one, it's a number. So a string integer or number, Marco 33, David 13, assigning those to itself, so name, age. So if I console log both of those class objects, person1, person2, you see that it's printing to the console that's a person object with those keys and those key values. I can access those keys by using the dot key name or square bracket and the key name in as a string. Marco 13. So working as expected. That's beautiful. So now let's run one of the methods. It's by we're just pushing a new key into our class object. We're pushing an email address, and then we're printing into our console our class object string method. So we're just reprinting a JSON. So let's run it again. Didn't save it. Let's clear it. So again, where classes are useful and where, again, the purpose or the day-to-day usage of classes. Again, for example, when you're having, in this case, a person. So you have first name, last name, age, job description, email address, gender, marital status. You have everything in a template. So you are just basically filling holes and reuse reusing that template by using the new So again, very easy to reuse and everything. It's very structured. So again, we know exactly which methods we have available in our class, and we know exactly how to return everything. So it's basically a small package. We're just wrapping functions and constructors in this case in one package. And again, that's the beauty about classes. Again, very useful. Again, you can have as many classes as you want. So for example, when we were talking about calls, we can have a class for calls that will describe the call properties. So for example, the call queue duration, queue name, queue unique ID, owner, all that in a class that we can reuse and create multiple calls, class objects, by just providing different input parameters when assigning those class objects. So that's the beauty about classes. So now let's complete this video by working with the Node package manager. So first things first, how we initialize our package. So we have to use this npm init command. This is to initialize it. First, it's how we want to name our package. So by default is just using the folder name, the version of our package, keywords for the search results, author, so Mark Martinez, license, blah blah blah. It's okay. Yes, package JSON. Okay, this is how we initialize our Node package manager. So now let's install a library, npm e for installing. Let's, for example, for this tutorial, let's use Moment. Moment, it's one of my favorite modules or libraries or package, wherever you want to call it. Here in the instructions, we have how to install it on Node.js, npm install Moment. So let's do that. Npm in for install Moment, and let's save it to our package.json file. Oh my god, it got deleted. Moment, and save for saving that into our package.json file. Perfect, installed. So now let's just do a small analysis of what happened. So if I open my working directory, I have now three different one folder called node_modules. I have package.json file, package-log.json file. So what are those? The first one, the folder, the node_modules. So that's the folder that contains the modules that I install and their dependencies. So for example, if I open this folder, Moment installed, yes, just one folder, But if your module has dependencies of its own, it will also install those dependencies. So you will see all the dependencies in here in separate in different folders. So now let's go to our package.json and package.log.json file. So the first one was created when we initialized our module or the package, or the not package manager. Where it is, it's package.json. Yeah, this one. So here the name of this package, test scripts, the repository, the author that we just defined at the beginning of this part. But the thing that is important to us is the dependencies. So in that dependencies key, we have an object. So we have as a dependency for running I'm basically telling Node.js that for running my index file, I have a dependency, and my dependency it's a package name moment. And moment, I require the package that it's greater than version, so equal or greater than version 2.24. So that's how you read it. So greater or equal that version 2.24 of moment. So that's my dependency. And if I look at my package -log.json file, it looks similar. On the dependencies keys, we have that we are requiring moment, but the main difference here is that basically the log file is that it logs the version that you are working on. So in other words, this file is telling me that when I install the moment package, the version was 2.24. So you can actually know exactly on which version you were working currently. So that's nice. So now let's show you how. So let's just complete this tutorial by doing a small example in moment. Where is our index file? Index file. So here in the instructions says that for using moment you have to require it. So require the package or the module moment. So we're assigning that to a variable, to a constant called moment. So recurring moment, and we're just printing to console the current time formatted. So let's clear the console. Let's run Node.js, not index. And yet it's working as expected. It's printing the current time as a string. So again, I highly recommend you this library, this module. And again, let me just show you lastly, just to complete this video. If I delete folder, if I delete the node_modules folder, or if you are downloading a library from GitHub, the thing that you have to do after cloning the repository, or if you want to reinstall all the dependencies, you have to run the command npm install or I. So by running this command of npm install, it will basically read through your package.json file, and it will automatically download its dependencies. Okay, so again, just to show you that it's still working, not in the index, it's working as intended. So I hope that you like this video. It's a little bit late for me. I'm a little bit tired, but again, we just covered the basics of our first part of advanced concepts of Node.js and JavaScript. We still have a couple of more topics to cover in part 2. But anyways, keep in touch and hit like if you like this video, and subscribe to the channel if you like to. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.